In my 42 years of work, I use the word fortunate that I have encountered practically all of those archetypes. And why I say I'm fortunate is the irony is that it is because I've encountered those people. I have learned so much about how to deal with those difficult bosses and how not to be one of those yourself as well. Let me begin with one example.
Welcome to the Game of Impossible podcast. My name is Leon and this is my dad, Idris Jala. We are a father and son podcast where we discuss all things transformation through the lens of business, leadership, sport, and faith. Dad, I thought it would be good to talk today about difficult or even bad bosses. How do you manage a difficult boss? But also, what do you do if maybe you are one of those difficult bosses? And I think it would be good to then explore some practical handles as well. But before we go into that, some interesting stats. Now, there was a Deloitte study that showed that 65% of employees say that they would rather change boss than have a pay rise.
Wow.
It's quite fascinating. So let's talk about some archetypes of bad bosses. First, you have the micromanager. The micromanager is someone who operates from a trust deficit and as a result tends to hoard or control the work themselves. And the impact of this is obviously burnout from the team, but also frustration that can stem from a lack of ownership. The other is the ghost, someone who's a bit aloof, absent, not really there, perhaps also unclear about his or her objectives for the team. As a result of this, the team can be left confused and even disengaged. The other is the volcano. I think we're all familiar. We've all probably experienced one or two volcanoes in our lives, prone to emotional outbursts and mood swings. And the result of that is fear-based compliance within the team. The other is the credit taker. Very quick to take credit when something goes well, but also very quick to point the blame to others when things don't go so well. The result of this is resentment as well as disengagement. And then finally, the unaware. The unaware is usually someone who's a poor communicator. Oftentimes, this is an interesting one because sometimes you find that these people actually mean well, but because of a lack of self-awareness, they're perhaps a bit tone deaf. And then what happens is that they're unable to communicate in the right way. And they get a negative response, one usually of frustration or even at its worst, culture rot as well. So before we go into these kind of practical handles, I first want to ask you something that I've actually never asked you before, which was in your working experience, and you don't have to name a name, but has there been either an example of a difficult boss or maybe a difficult experience that you had with a previous boss?
Well, in my 42 years of work, Leon, I use the word that will be quite jarring to many people. I've been very fortunate that I have encountered practically all of those archetypes. And why I say I'm fortunate is the irony is that it is because I've encountered those people. I have learned so much about how to deal with those difficult bosses and how not to be one of those yourself as well. Let me begin with one example, begin with micromanager, the one you described, the first one, archetype. When I was in Holland, I had a boss that was a really difficult person that wants to micromanage. Because of my interaction with him, I learned one thing. And I have used that regardless of whether I encounter a difficult boss as micromanager, that is the need to produce what I call today a 3-feet plan. And that means if you are clear about the results, normally your micromanager, you begin with determining what's the KPI. That's never the issue. That guy wants to micromanage, but if you produce a 3-feet plan, and that's so detailed, you will have it on a weekly basis. Every Friday, you know who is going to do what is how do you come out? The beauty here is that in your 3-feet plan, when you deal with micromanager, you put inside the 3-feet plan activities that he or she is going to do on a weekly basis. So because he or she has to turn up and do what is on the plan, if he or she fail in doing it, you will find that person actually now will learn to let go. Because you see, if you are delivering your piece and he's not delivering it, then he has a problem. That's exactly what I learned from that boss.
What's also helpful there is, on the
Yeah.
one hand, it's also creating a bit of okay, this seems like this involves maybe too much involvement from me. But also what it does is it frames the expectation on where is it appropriate for this boss to step in and where is it appropriate for me to handle it.
Correct.
So by setting that up front, if you're maybe a boss who likes control, I think you'd be more willing to relinquish control when the guidelines are very clearly set. Because then that builds trust because this person seems to have it all planned out. Perhaps I can trust his or her
and
instinct.
it is because of that experience I had. I didn't like it then. I considered it was a terrible experience.
Interesting.
But it was because of that experience I have now developed the need for everything that I do today. I call it a 3 feet plan. You don't have a 30,000 feet plan, you bring it down to the level of detail so everybody knows the part that they have to play. And it was because of that experience I've learned how to do that. And so I consider that a very important part of my approach to leadership, producing a 3 feet plan, not a 10,000 feet, not 100,000 feet, not a high level plan, bringing it down to the level of detail. This is the way to deal with a micromanager. If you produce a 3 feet plan, immediately the guy says, I like this. Straight away, you will find that person begin to relax. You know why he likes it? Because you're going to give him an update on a weekly basis. He doesn't need to ask for it. They'll be on a Friday, on a weekly basis. There's a dashboard that you're going to put it. The micromanager in that person suddenly become a very relaxed person. That's how you deal with a micromanager. To me, encountering a micromanager is a very important ingredient. And for you to learn to produce a 3 feet plan. And if you can deal with that micromanager by producing a 3 feet plan, you will find that micromanager will begin to back up.
Yeah. Have you then found yourself having micromanagerial tendencies?
Myself?
Yourself?
Well, simply because I realized that if you produce it, you yourself also, if I'm a micromanager, I'm also relaxed because I know what my guys are going to do on a weekly basis. And this is the beauty. The moment you have a 3 feet plan, everyone in the organization now begin to back out because it's so clear who's going to do what. The parts we all play, the interdependency. And when problems are not being resolved, you are going to switch. In one of our episodes, we talk about problem solving.
Yeah.
If it's red color, the following week you get into the routine of problem solving. And that's where it becomes very, very important, the DMS.
Let's zero in on the DMS one because I think this nicely then can, I would think, become the antidote to the next type of problem boss, which is the ghost.
The ghost.
One who is absent and aloof. And we have often said on this podcast that if you do not engage actively in problem solving, that you cannot carry the badge of being a leader.
Sure.
And so I think if you are someone who's naturally a bit more aloof, a discipline of problem solving could be one way to engage.
Absolutely.
Then for you to engage as a leader, but also if you're managing upwards, for you to be able to engineer an environment where your manager has to engage as well. Maybe talk us through if there's an example of maybe a ghost that you have worked with, and then what did you do to work around?
I had a boss exactly like that when I was in London. In Shell London, I had a boss like that. And I call him the ghost, you call it. I call him the absent boss. The guy is not there, but you know how you get him involved is that when we have a red color on the dashboard on a weekly basis, we always had this idea of an automatic escalation. Within 2 weeks, it's my problem, I have to resolve it. If I can't resolve it, then it has to be escalated to my boss, my supervisor. And he is involved in the problem solving. So the system that we have is that the automatic escalation of problem in a way force that boss to be involved because the problem solving will have him involved in the problem solving. That's the reason why I can't do it because the decision is not mine. Based on the manual of authority, all organizations have manual of authority. In that manual of authority, the decision to make the call on that particular item, if it's with the boss must be sitting there. He cannot be the ghost boss. He cannot be the absent boss. He has to sit there in that meeting, and that's how you draw them in. Because we have problem solving on a weekly basis. Because the automatic escalation force the absent bosses, the ghost bosses to be present in the problem solving. And because the manual of authority says no one else has the authority to make decision except the absent boss, but he needs to be involved in that meeting to make the call, to make the decisions. That's how you get that. So I've been very fortunate because I had a boss like that. Then in my vocabulary on management, we have the automatic escalation of problem solving.
Can I ask on this one? Because a lot of people, they listen to some of these concepts that we share, some of these systems that we share on the podcast, but they ask, and I think valid questions, because they ask, well, what if I'm very junior in the firm, in the organization, and I don't hold any decision-making power? Now, this presumes that you have some agency to be able to begin a new system, an automatic escalation system, or whatever else it might be. But what if you don't necessarily have the influence to be able to effect
call
that?
for that meeting?
Then how do you, what do you do?
You know, it is very simple. You can call for that. We call it the convening power. If you don't have a convening power to call for a meeting, but you have the power to send an email to all of them and CC everybody. So what you then do is that you send it to so and so. It said, based on the manual of authority, sir, you are the only person that's authorized to make the decision to solve this problem. Then you CC to all the relevant parties who are involved in it. And I have done the syndication with A, B, and C, and they all collectively conclude that the solution to this problem is the following. And based on the manual of authority, you're the only person that's authorized to make the call on it. All of us, having discussed it, we conclude that the solution is this. Will you now say yes to this proposal to make the call? I mean, that is how you get that absent manager to really has no choice. You have not the convening authority to call for everybody to come for the meeting, let alone call the boss. But you definitely can send an email. But the key here is that you refer to the manual of authority, saying that he has the authority to make the decision, and you say to him, that you have now syndicated with everybody else. All the people conclude that there's only one solution to this, and this is the solution. You will find that absent boss or that ghost boss has got no choice. He's got to make the call because he's now snookered into having to make the decision. He's checkmated to make the decision.
So you heard it, get typing away, get working on your emails. But I think that's a good point, because with any change management, you have to figure out a way that will get people on board with the lowest amount of friction. And so this is a good example, because if it's difficult to begin to propose a new system, to convene and to have kind of a fixed touch point for everyone to give up of their time to sit in a meeting, that doesn't mean that you can't start with a simple email or something else to be able to kind of allow people to have a foot in on that new process or that new system that you want to adopt. And then I think by doing that, organically over time, if that small behavior is repeated enough, those small behaviors can then begin to form the basis of a structure and a format, which then can become an instituted system. But sometimes the best thing to do is just to start it organically like this. And if we are creating systems, sometimes that's also helpful, I suppose, because it allows us to test out the system. We're not building a system based on an assumption, but that we build a system and we institutionalize the system based on tried and tested actions, smaller steps that we can control as individuals. So that's a good point. Now let's talk about the third one. This one is fun. The volcano. Have you had? What are some interesting stories of dealing with a volcano? This is actually, for me personally, one that I have not. Okay, maybe I take that back. Maybe I have had. I wouldn't call this person a volcano boss, but there have been volcano moments. Maybe what were some examples of this for you?
I must say, in my 42 years, I didn't have a direct boss who's a volcano. And to use the other word for this, the bully. But I have worked with bosses on the side and I have observed them who are volcanoes. And these are people, I call them managing with spasm. they manage
Almost
with
spat my
spasm.
water.
So they manage with emotion.
Yeah.
The temperature rise on the smallest thing that will irritate them. And in a calm meeting on maybe on Wednesday, everybody come and have their cup of coffee. It's a very nice meeting. And suddenly there's something in the presentation that really get the guy completely off the cliff. And then you find 4-letter words spilling out almost immediately.
Yeah.
And I have also seen people, those my immediate bosses, stopping someone making the presentation. I would say this is in the government. And I wasn't at that time a minister, and I had interacted, I had a meeting, and I would say this was a minister. I was not in the government
You
then.
realize everybody is going to write in the comments now,
Yeah.
who was it?
I was not in the government, and I was having a meeting with the government when I was in the private sector, and the minister involved, listening to a presentation, he stopped that person on slide number 2.
A great start.
Absolutely, slide number 2. He said, "Do not make any more presentation. This is just a waste of time. I'm going to call off this meeting." Didn't even hear, because actually, if you look at the presentation after we finished the meeting, the minister actually walked out from that presentation. So a few of us were seated in the room there. We knew the slides because the slides were sent in advance. The answers were in the subsequent slide. But the minister, he just got completely riled at slide number 3 and didn't even listen to the opportunity for the person to present the rest of the slide. The meeting was cancelled. This is what I call the volcano.
Yeah.
The
Interestingly, the volcanoes can also, the shadow side of the volcano is that it can lead to, unnecessary emotional outbursts that derail us from anything productive. But I've also seen the positive side of people who have this tendency, and it's because they are
very
they're
directive,
driven by their emotions. They can also, on the positive side, be the most charismatic leaders as well.
Yeah.
And the leaders where, if we are aligned, will have the most conviction in driving whatever it is you want to achieve forward.
Agree. So if you look at it, to your point, it's the same coin. The positive side of the same coin, you use the word very directive. Use the word robust.
Yeah.
But on the negative side, that means if you overuse that same strength, it becomes negative. And that's when the emotion gets in the way, it becomes a bully. Instead of being directive, that person turns to become a bully and turn to become an obstinate person, no longer firm.
Exactly.
Firm is the positive side of it. When you overuse the firmness, the assertiveness, it becomes aggressive, it becomes a bully.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think since we've done this, it's also worth maybe backtracking a bit to qualify that even for the micromanager, that there is, as much as there's a shadow side to it, there's also a positive. Because the core of a micromanager, hopefully, is that they operate from a place of wanting to ensure excellence.
Absolutely.
And it's in the pursuit of excellence that sometimes the shadow side of that is they over-control the outcome and they don't trust others to be able to excel. Similarly, for the ghost, perhaps the positive side of the ghost is because they are an empowering leader and they believe in releasing and empowering the teams. But the shadow side to that, you can end up not providing guidance when guidance is required.
So let me return back to the bully or the volcano. How to deal with a boss like that?
Yeah.
For me, first of all, do not react with emotion. That guy, that lady who's jumping with spasm during the meeting, do not respond with spasm. Just keep calm based on the facts. The way to handle a volcano is, prior to the meeting, you must have enough syndication with senior people that are more senior than the volcano and obtain their views and their opinion, which are different. Huh?
The politics of
The politics.
delivery.
So if you have now engaged the key stakeholders on the same topic, and better still, they are his bosses, even more senior than him or her, and then you put in clearly the differing opinions on it, you will find that the volcano calmed down because he realized that he is a bull in the China shop, but he realized there are bigger bulls out there as well.
You know what's interesting about this? So you and I have quite, okay, I wouldn't say that they are different because I would also then apply these same principles, but my default usually tends to be how do we address it at the level of the interaction. But I realize whenever you talk about a solution to a problem, it's always an environmental change.
Yeah.
So similarly with creating a fixed touch point for problem solving that creates an environment for someone who's aloof to be involved. In this case, creating an environment where there are other senior people who you have lobbied naturally gets the volcano to maybe be a bit more objective in the thing. You know. But maybe while we're on it, it is also because you did mention that if a volcano confronts you on something, don't allow your first reaction to be one of rebuttal. And it's worth zeroing on this one for a bit, because for those of us who think, well, I don't know if I can necessarily change the environment. Here's a behavioral thing if you are caught in a conversation, because sometimes there will be conversations that you have and you've got no other thing to do but to deal with it head on. And when you shared that, it just reminded me of what Chris Voss said, and Chris Voss is a former FBI negotiator. He said that negotiation is not an act of battle, but an act of discovery. And he has this useful tool, and he calls it the power of "that's right." So he said that in any negotiation, and now you could argue that maybe this is a bit coercive, but he says in any conversation, in any negotiation, what you want to try to do is not to get the other person to say you're right. Because for me to say you are right, if I am a volcano and if I have an ego, that's going to undermine my own ego, my own power. And so I will be very uncomfortable if the conversation is navigating towards you are right from me. But what he says instead is flip the script and find little prompts and things for the other person to say that's right. And usually this involves things like asking if you are a volcano and you are accusing me of something, maybe you the example you gave, you've stopped me at slide 2 and you've said, this slide presentation is terrible, please stop. Rather than trying to defend my case and saying, no, it's good, I've done the prep, let me show you. That is a you're right stance. How do you get this person to arrive at that's right is you start asking, may I understand, do you think that the presentation is poor because, and then you give some assumptions as to why they might be rejecting it. And then what that produces is yes, that's right. I don't think it's good. And his point is, if you try to engineer as many of these that's right responses from people, you're more likely to ultimately land at a point where you can objectively now have a good conversation about this and get a positive outcome from the discussion.
There's a guy called George Parsons whom I had the privilege to work with many years ago, and he deals with people when he talks about bullies or volcano. The reason why they are volcanoes is this: our mind, the frontal lobe of the brain, is the rational side. The behind of the brain is called the bird brain. The bird brain is the one that has the emotion. So even the volcano, when under calm and collected situation, the volcano is a rational person.
Exactly.
When the person flip to use the bird brain, it's already the emotion, no longer looking at the facts. George Parsons' view is this: any one of those volcano person, they have a tendency. If the person is directive style, that means when the person is very unhappy, if the guy is naturally a directive person, the language you need to talk for the person, the language of a result. And if the person is a bully, but it's more a perfectionist kind of a person, the person that wants the perfection is demanding time. Because without time, It cannot find a perfect solution. So what do you do with a guy like that? When the moment he is completely riled up on emotion, he said, "Sir, we will give enough time for us to look for it." If that person who is already using the bird brain is the analytical type, the thing that will calm the person down from being a volcano is data and facts. Then you all you need to do to that person is, I will find the facts, the data that will require the empirical evidence. Then you got person is calmed down. That volcano person also can get riled up. It person is what's called accommodating style. That means he believe in harmonious relationship. And it becomes a volcano when he realized that you have now caused friction in the organization. So the language they use to calm that person down is to say that we will now focus on establishing good rapport in relationship with people. You notice every single one of these, when you understand their natural tendency, you use the language and they calm them down. What happened is that the mind starts shifting from the bird brain to the frontal lobe.
Yeah.
The rational lobe. And the person who is a volcano becomes a normal, rational person. So I've used that in a lot of dealing with conflict resolutions. So the directive style, the perfecting style, the analytical style, the accommodating style. In fact, there's another one that I forgot to mention, the facilitating style. The person is interested in process. So if your guy is process oriented, if you want to talk about data, he will be even more riled up. But you only need to talk about process. What are the process steps? He said, "Sir, these are the process steps we are going to take. And if you're not clear about what they are," I said, "in the next couple of days, I will come with the process steps to make it clear that then the person becomes relaxed."
Yeah.
So you really have to find them to get them out from the emotion, out from the volcano, to become a very rational and a normal person to handle this.
Very good. That's definitely going to make a good good shot on IG and on TikTok. Let's talk about now the credit taker or the credit hoarder. What do you do when you are met with a credit taker? And if you feel that you are prone to hoarding credit, what can you do to be able to
I have
release
many
it?
bosses like that. I have, from the time I was young to the time I was middle manager to become senior, very senior, I have met many of them.
This one is common.
I call them it's all about me boss, or the credit thief.
Credit thief.
Yeah,
Actually, that's a
credit
nice one. Yeah, maybe we should use that
Credit thief.
instead.
So these people, the first thing you need to do, let's suppose you have a very big spectacle, you have a big meeting that has a lot of people. The first thing you must do, let the boss have the starting opening remark.
Yeah.
And make sure that he or she has the closing remark, because they always like to be, it's all about me.
Yeah.
And every time, I'm not saying that you want to bodek that fellow, but the reality is that it's important to play on the ego. These people love to see themselves on the pedestal. So it's no harm, in my view, giving them credit. And so making reference to them, he said, like, so and so has given me the steer for me to go and do this. And then you say, this is the presentation. You tell the boss, the meeting is going to last for 8 hours. We have a whole open day here. So we're going to put you produce the opening remark. And so you give the opening remark, and then you say, this is what we are planning to do. I said, Idris is going to present this. Afterwards, Ali is going to do that. And so the person becomes the orchestrator in the eyes of everybody else. But what is happening is that the content is presented by the individual parties that are the experts in that area.
Yeah, and you don't have to feel guilty if
You
you
don't.
are the contributor.
No,
you
not
no
at all.
longer have to feel guilty about giving it your 110%
Correct.
and stealing the show, because you've now created a very clear frame to say that no matter what I do, I won't be stealing your thunder, because by putting you up front, the perception to everyone else, or the perception that you can choose to believe, some might argue the delusion that you can choose to have, is that my amazing contribution is the result of your tremendous leadership. It may be true, but in some cases also it could be untrue. But sometimes if you want to get ahead, you have to sometimes be able to play into this a little bit. because I think it would be better for you to do this and be unhindered than in your individual contribution than to not do this and to have your contributions stifled in the fear of overshadowing your boss.
And the other thing that I use, this is a very, very important tool that I use when I was CEO, I was managing director, and I have a chairman or chair lady. Every board meeting or every AGM, I will sit with the chairperson to discuss in detail what we intend to do. People who are the credit thief, they're looking for how they are beginning to make the statement upfront so that it look like they are the ones responsible for doing it. So if you tell the person right in front, this is what we are going to cover, in the opening remark, that person will make the linkage to himself or herself to show to people he is the reason why the result is as good as it looks. Because you don't surprise that person. And so if you start doing that, no harm in what I call becoming the shampoo.
The shampoo.
If you have nice hair, you walk around in the shopping mall, nobody will come out and say, "Hey, Leon, what shampoo do you use?" They will say, "You have very nice hair."
Right, okay, understand.
So what you need to do is, so you become the shampoo. If the boss looks good and the result is, it's okay. I always tell the young, very impetuous young graduates who are all wanting to get credit for themselves, be patient. Your time will come. And make sure that you become the shampoo. If the boss looks good, the departments get results, I can tell you eventually the truth will set you free. Even if these people start to steal the credit at some point will return to you. Be patient, wait for your time. Don't be too impetuous to try to steal the credit, and don't get involved in a mudslinging contest over credit. And if it's difficult, just focus on delivering your job. Eventually people will know.
If you are a credit taker, actually what we have found quite useful is that we have what we call a skip level policy at HTBB, the church that I work at. And this allows anyone who, let's say you are my direct line report, but above you there's someone else. That means that I have every right to be able to have check-ins as well with the person above you. And so I've found this quite useful because if, let's say, I know that my team has access and frequent check-ins as well with my boss, it means that I'm also kind of held accountable now.
Absolutely.
Because you don't know what they will reveal. And in this case, I think it works both ways because it ensures accountability if you are maybe that credit thief manager, or if you have those tendencies, but also if you are the contributor, and to your point earlier about you feel like, will my contributions be forever shadowed and forever not recognized? By having a skip level arrangement, that also allows you to ensure that other people are seeing your contributions. It's a little bit like what you described earlier about before a board meeting, ensuring that you have some kind of contact time with the chairperson first, so that even if one person tries to steal the show and take the credit, we've already understood among ourselves that I contributed to that piece of work.
And the third point is this, dealing with the credit thief. Every year there is the annual staff appraisal and ranking.
Exactly.
Let's say the boss is a credit thief, and this guy is a perpetual credit thief. He wants to steal everything from everybody. But the exercise called the merit increment, the bonus exercise, the ranking exercise. Let's say he's got 10 people reporting to him or her. He's got to follow the normal distribution curve. Who are the top among the 10? Who's the top 5%? Who's the next, 30%? Who's the remaining 70%? And that person has got to do it. You know what? The person who's delivering the results will appear in the top 5%. And the next best person will appear in the next 30%. The best thing for him or her to do is that during the time of giving the bonuses and merit increment, that person cannot say, I am the reason why everything has been delivered.
Because
the system allows for a fair distribution of the bonuses. So he cannot steal the bonus to himself.
Yeah.
It will be given to the right people. So for the impetuous young people who are so desirous of wanting to draw the credit, calm down, because the annual increment, the bonuses is going to come. So if you just keep your head down, deliver your job, even the ultimate credit thief is going to grant it to you during the merit increment, because the rules of the game, he cannot put all the bonuses to himself. That's not doable. So in the end, that's why I say the term we use in Christianity is the truth will set you free. And in this case, the truth that sets you free is your result. Make sure you deliver your results. And when you deliver your results, the credit thief cannot take away that result from you.
People can't necessarily change other people.
Yeah.
But results and environment certainly can.
Absolutely.
And that's a good example. And I think let's finally talk about the last type of difficult person or difficult boss, which is the unaware, the person who maybe is a bit tone deaf and maybe well-intentioned, but just is not very well liked in the organization.
Yeah.
And maybe just has poor communication ability and for whatever reason, just unable to communicate their ideas in the way that they were intended to be. They tried to give encouragement, but it becomes taken as a backhanded compliment instead. I think there are quite a few people like this as well.
These are very awkward people.
And I sympathize with this category because in most cases they are well-intentioned.
They're well-intentioned.
This is the difficult one to deal with.
They're very difficult. People like this, I call them the awkward soloist. They tend to thrive in single endeavors. They do not thrive in a team sport when there are a lot of players that are involved because they are almost left field. So I always find people like this best to give them solo endeavors. Give them clear tasks. Let that person run with it. And so if a boss is a very unaware kind of guy, because you give him a very tight brief, he said, this is the whole thing that we do. There are 10 things that needs to be done, but you allow that person a very tight brief to go and focus on this part of it, and you know how it relates to the rest, the interconnectivity. You'll find that person actually has a part to play. And when he or she then establish the connection during the meeting, then you'll find that they call the unaware soloist become aware of the connectivity. Because everybody, you know what they say, I am presenting my part, ladies and gentlemen, and this is how my part has connected with so-and-so's part. And you then establish the connection between what you're doing and what the other person is doing. The other person, I'm C, I'm doing the part C. And this is how my C connects with what the other person is doing. The unaware guy then becomes aware how it connects. So all these guys need to do is to make the connection. The unawareness is because they cannot make the connection. But the connection comes from dividing the parts and making other people make a reference to what he or she is doing. When the person feels good about it, they begin to, you know what, they become nosy pucker. They just begin to want to know what the other guys are doing and say, oh, I'm interested. When you then make the person becoming more and more interested in what you are doing, then it's tremendous. The other thing that is needed, let's say, even the difficult boss who is an unaware soloist, he will have his own boss. And if this boss understands that person is the unaware soloist, if he plays the part correctly and tells everybody, there are a lot of linkages here. All of you have to play your part. And say, let's say that guy is a marketing manager. He's completely unaware that's going on everywhere. And he said, look, you are marketing, but you are dependent on the sales manager in the team. But the sales manager cannot deliver it if the product is not even available from the manufacturing plant. The guys in the manufacturing manager must make sure every week we have enough stock to supply it. You will find that the person then realizes the unaware boss is now forced to find out the linkages.
Yeah.
And if you produce a routine, and in this routine, they all must provide their update to everybody else. The unaware soloist is now forced by the routine. The word used cadence, to implement a cadence so that there's a routine for them to connect with one another. You'll find that person who is the unaware soloist will now, no choice. He's become part of the wider tent, and he's become no choice. He's got to be involved in everybody else is doing. So I find that's why I began by saying, Leon, I've been very fortunate. 42 years of work life experience. I have met every single one of those people in my working career, and I consider it's a blessing.
Yeah.
And it's
Exactly.
because of that I have learned so much about what to do and what not to do. And we produce what's called the 8-step big fast result methodology. And all of that, if you follow the 8-step process, regardless of whether the person is a volcano, the absent manager, micromanager, the 8-step deals with all types of archetypes.
Yeah, that's very good. And I think if there are people who are managing upwards to either of these difficult people, hopefully through this episode, you've gotten some practical handles for how to do that better, how to, on the one hand, have maybe conversations around it, but also I think more pertinently, how to create environments where the change in behavior is almost a given. And then if you happen to be one of those people as well, I think the encouragement, if we go back to one of your earlier points, is that with all of these archetypes, as much as there's a shadow side, there's also a positive side. So the question is, how do you then address what is the core value that causes either of these reactions? And how do you then say, how can I focus on the positive side of me having this particular tendency? The irony, as we were talking about the unaware soloist, as you call it, is that my role at HTB is in leadership development.
Right.
So I like to think that I'm pretty self-aware, but I'm very humbled by this statistic, which says that 90% of people think they are self-aware, when in fact only 10% of people actually are self-aware. And what a great reminder that is for those of us who think that we are self-aware, to remember that actually all of us, not just when in the area of awareness, but all of us will have times where we will default to either one of these tendencies. But the important thing is to not be discouraged by it, to acknowledge it. That's half the battle won. If we acknowledge that we have either of these problems, that gives us a better starting point to think of things we can do to begin to change that slightly.
I want to tell you a story, Leon, and this is a very interesting story. Years ago, when I worked as the managing director and also country chairman of Shell in Sri Lanka, we were going to build a terminal, Shell gas terminal, in the port of Colombo, laying the pipelines through the Dutch Canal all the way to a place called Keriwala Pitia. Before I went there, this project is notorious for being full of delays. And it was supposed to have been built 4 years before I arrived. The project didn't even begin. There were lots of problems. So when we went out there, they sent one of the top project directors, his name is Carl Coleman, whom you remember the guy. So he was sent, they said, this guy is very good. There was a project manager reporting to him, and he was reporting to me. They told me this, Idris, because this project is notorious for being delayed, they are going to get a person from the center to come and kickstart this project. They call him the gunslinger in project management. His name is Hans Strauch. I remember his name. He flew from Holland. We had our first meeting. We all sat down in the table. He turned to me. Are you responsible for making sure that this project is delivered, Idris? Yes or no? Yes, I'm responsible. You know what he said? You are not the person responsible. Then he turned to Carl Coleman. He's the project director. Carl, are you responsible for making this project successful and delivered? So of course it's me, I'm the project director. Carl, you are not responsible for making this project work. He turned to the other guy, I think Tom, his name. Tom, you are the project manager. you are responsible. You are responsible. And he had a beard.
Right.
He said, I do not want you to shave your beard because every time I come from Holland, every quarter I will come here, all of us will look at you. I will call you the man with the beard. You know why I forgot his name? Because we call him the man with the beard. Do not shave your beard. You are the man with the beard. You know, then he turned to me. Idris, your job as the chairman and the CEO is to help Tom, the man with the beard. When he has a problem, your job is to help him deliver it. Carl, your job is to help him deliver it. Every problem is the man with the beard. That is the man with the beard. And all of us look at him. So we should call him every single week. How can we help you deliver the terminal and the project?
That's good.
I can tell you, that was a learning lesson. From that moment onwards, I can tell you, we had a detailed 3-feet plan. Exactly how we're going to do it. We had problem solving every week because my job is to help him. Carol Coleman's job is to help him because Hans Troik, when he sends email, he doesn't send it to me, he sends to him. And it's CC to Carl Coleman and others. We had all the tracking mechanism. Very interesting. He breaks to the entire protocol. He does not send the note to me as the managing director. Everything goes to the man with the beard. CC to me and Carl Coleman, and he says, Idris, your job is to help him. These are the problems. And the guy, it was absolutely instructional. And that's why I remember Hans Troik, he was the gunslinger in project management. And that was the technique he used. From then onwards, I refer to project management in the way the man with the beard.
And what a great place to end. Let's end this podcast on a high with impact. Yeah. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I certainly have. If you enjoyed conversations like this, we put up episodes every Friday at 6 a.m. So you can subscribe to our YouTube as well as our Spotify channel. We also upload short form content on both our IG as well as TikTok at The Game of Impossible. See you next week. But until then, take care.